Hello, welcome to the Wolfpacker Podcast. I'm Justin Williams. Today is Wednesday, June 8th, and we've got a very special episode for you today. We're going to talk a little bit of men's basketball, breaking news today in terms of an assistant coaching hire. Of course, we're going to get into the NBA draft decisions at the beginning of June. One important player coming back, one important player deciding that he is going to move on to the NBA. We'll get into all that good stuff. Plus, Dave Doeren's summer football camps kicked off over the past week here, so we're going to talk a little bit about impressions from what happened at those camps, and plus, we're going to talk a little bit of college baseball, disappointment with the Wolfpack not making the NCAA tournament, a big potential snub there, plus a very important player entering the transfer portal. We will get into all of that, but before we do, some housekeeping to take care of. If you haven't already, please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast wherever you listen to us. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, everywhere you listen to podcasts. Plus, you can always watch us on YouTube, on our YouTube channel. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, the Wolfpacker YouTube channel. And while you're at it, give this video a thumbs up and drop a comment. That helps us out tremendously. Of course, for all of your print news information and recruiting buzz and everything going on in NC State athletics. If you call yourself an NC State fan, you are a member of the Wolfpacker.com, part of the On3 network. So head over to the Wolfpacker.com. A special deal going on right now. For just $1, you get a year's worth of premium subscription to the Wolfpacker.com and the On3 network. That includes all of the latest and greatest recruiting buzz, insider information, a lot of the stuff we talk about in the podcast. We're recapping stuff. If you want to know about these things before they happen, if you want to be the most informed Wolfpack fan as part of your tailgate group, you should be a member of the Wolfpacker.com. So head over there right now. Take advantage of that deal. Just $1, year's worth of premium subscription. It takes you through next summer. So football season, next basketball season, all that good stuff included. Just $1. That's a heck of a deal. All right. Let's start this podcast. I'm joined today by Matt Carter, but I'm also joined by not a very special guest, but a new member of the Wolfpacker Podcast and a new writer for the Wolfpacker.com. His name is Ethan McDowell, newly hired as part of the Wolfpacker staff. And if you want to give him a follow on Twitter, his handle is @Ethan McDowell. And that's just not any Twitter follow. He's a blue check mark Twitter follow. So you better go and make sure that you follow this man. I followed him as soon as he was hired, and he is on top of everything. He's a great Twitter follow, by the way. He's been killing it with the recruiting information. He went to the summer camps this past week. He's firing off the tweets. If you are an NC State fan, you need to follow Ethan. But Ethan, welcome to the show. Welcome to the Wolfpacker. And I guess to start off, how is your first, I guess this is your first week and a half as part of the staff. How's it going? How are you liking Raleigh so far?
Yeah. Thanks for having me on, Justin. I really appreciate the kind words and everything. That means a lot. But yeah, I'm happy to be here. This is my second week. Things have been going great. I'm super thankful to Matt, Ryan, Stu, and everyone for the opportunity to be here. And we've really hit the ground running with camps going on and everything. We've been putting out the articles, putting out the scoops. And Justin, you mentioned the deal online, but it doesn't get better than $1 for a full year. And we've been putting out the information to make that deal well worth it. So make sure you guys, all the listeners, go click that link and subscribe to this podcast and get a subscription.
Already a company man. Plug in the website, plug in the special deal. That is why he is a rising star in the industry. And guys, the site just got a whole lot better because Ethan brings a ton of background in terms of recruiting scoops and buzz. I mean, I think he's been doing this since, you're in high school, Ethan? I mean, as soon as you follow this guy on Twitter, you read some of his content, you know that he eats, sleeps, and breathes football recruiting. And that is tons of valuable information. The site has just gone up tremendously since adding him. So seriously, that special deal, It is just $1, but it just got even more valuable now that that Ethan's part of the staff.
Let me add.
Welcome. Go ahead, Matt.
I was just going to add, I promise Ethan, I promise you do get a day off in the near future. He texted me last night. He said, I think I'm leaving. I just finished the top 5 players at camp. And I think he texted me at like 7:30, 7:45. And I'm like, oh, geez, Ethan, man, working that late. And then he texted me a little late. He said, I just talked to somebody we'll talk about here very shortly. I just talked to Brandon is it Sissy on the phone? Sissay? How do you pronounce it? Do you know, Ethan?
I think it's just Sis, but I'm not completely sure.
Yeah, he said, I talked to Brandon. We'll call him Brandon. I talked to Brandon on the phone. I got an update. I got some information for a scoop. I'm like, geez. I promise Ethan there will become a time where he will be allowed to take days off. He hasn't had one yet, I don't think, but I promise. Come July, he's going to get some he's going to get some days off.
Well, it's been really fun work so far, and I'm happy to put in those long hours, and I hope the content on the website reflects how much fun I've been having over the past week and a half here.
Okay.
Well, you better enjoy those long hours, Ethan. As someone that's been in your shoes, enjoy the summer, my friend, because once football season starts, it's a 7-day-a-week job. But you know what? NC State football this fall, it's going to be pretty fun to cover. I think there's a lot of excitement in Raleigh as we get closer to college football, and we're going to have more of these podcasts coming up as we get closer to college football season. Obviously, NC State's due for a special year, but we're not going to lead with football. We're going to lead with men's basketball. Got some breaking news today, as I teased at the beginning of this show. Joel Justis, recently hired today, June 8th, as part of the NC State Wolfpack men's basketball coaching staff. He comes from Arizona State. He was an assistant as part of the Sun Devils staff, but also in his background on his resume, he was an assistant at Kentucky, which for all of you college basketball fans out there, you know that recruiting is the name of the game. And even now in 2022, the transfer portal is becoming increasingly important. Well, if you were part of the staff at Kentucky, you got to know how to recruit. And especially in the age of NIL, when you're at Kentucky and you're chasing the big dogs at Kentucky, you probably know a thing or two about what it takes to land some of these blue chip prospects, particularly in the age of NIL. So, Matt, I'm going to start with you, and then Ethan will go to you. But Matt, just your, reaction to this hiring and what has seemed to be a pretty successful offseason for Coach Kevin Keatts in terms of ramping up his bench.
Yeah, it kind of stood out to me about Joel is he's got a background in North Carolina. I suspect that played a role in him coming to NC State. The guy, he went to high school in the state of North Carolina. He coached high school basketball in the state of North Carolina. I think he went to UNC Wilmington.
He did.
Yeah, so he had the background at UNC Wilmington. So obviously, it's a combination of, obviously, he's got coaching talent. John Calipari just doesn't hire anybody. Clearly, he saw something in Joel Justis. And clearly, when Joel Justis, went somewhere else, he lands with Bobby Hurley at Arizona State, who's another, not of the caliber of John Calipari accomplished, but certainly a notable head coach in college basketball. I wonder if the allure of moving back to the state of North Carolina played a role in his decision. But, you're getting guys who have both familiarity with the program, and Levi Watkins being an alum, and now you got a guy who has a lot of familiarity with the area in Joel Justis. And I think that was important for Kevin Keatts to have. So, came out of left field for me. I'll be blunt. Yeah, I was beginning to wonder if they were just going to promote Steve Snell up from director of basketball operations. In fact, we had a question on the chat. I'm kind of wondering if they're going to promote Steve Snell, and then literally 2 minutes later, I get a text, Joel Justis. So I was like, well, who's Joel Justis? So I looked him up. And, oh, that must be a new assistant coach. So then I put it on the message board. And then literally 30 seconds later, Ethan's hitting me up on Slack. Joel Justis is going to be the next assistant coach. So if Jeff Goodman didn't beat me by about 5 minutes on that information. But I know Ethan looked him up. Apparently, he did a heck of a job winning and recruiting. Disclaimer real quick. Obviously, recruiting at Kentucky is different than recruiting at other college basketball programs. Certainly, they can attract a different level of talent. Not to just NC State. I'm talking they attract a different level of talent than 99% of college basketball. But he does have a good track record of recruiting at Kentucky.
And Ethan, we'll go to you. I know that, your first week and a half at the Wolfpacker has been pretty much all football recruiting, and you've been, knee deep in football summer camps here. But just your reaction to this hiring and, from the outside now coming into the circle of the NC State beat, just your thoughts on what Kevin Keatts has been able to do this summer in terms of revamping his assistant coaching staff.
Yeah, well, obviously starting with Justis, I mean, after finishing last place in the ACC and just coming in here and looking at the program from a bird's eye point of view, I don't think you can really do better than hiring Justis. It seems like it's going to be a pretty perfect match. Matt, you mentioned how Kentucky plays on just a different playing field when it comes to recruiting than NC State, but NC State has shown they can pull in some highly rated prospects in the past. They haven't pulled in a 5-star since, I believe, 2016, but they've had some committed. And maybe Justis is the step there that gets those kids from committing to actually signing and actually getting on campus. And one thing I wanted to point out about Justis as well is how the role he's had at Kentucky in developing some of their star guards. I read this on his Arizona State bio, but he played a significant role in developing Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who obviously is a star in the NBA now. But when he arrived at Kentucky, he wasn't that heralded of a recruit and really developed there and really turned into a great player who's now playing incredible in the NBA. And other guys like Emmanuel Quickley, Tyler Harrow, Keldon Johnson, those are really good players who are now really good NBA players who Justis can now walk in the recruits' living rooms, point to those guys, and say, I worked with them in college. And that's invaluable for a staff and just having that experience on the recruiting trail. And then you tie all that back in with the North Carolina roots he has, the North Carolina roots on the rest of the staff. It seems like NC State is positioning itself really well for a bounce-back year right now.
Yeah, really well said, Ethan. And you bring up a great point in terms of player development. The knee-jerk reaction whenever these hires are made, particularly assistant coaches, is, okay, what can they contribute recruiting-wise? But a big part of their job is what they do behind closed doors at the Dale Center, developing these guys during the offseason and throughout the year in practice so that they can perform at the highest level when it comes to game time. And it actually gives us a great segue, Ethan. Well played there to a very talented guard that is coming back to NC State that Justis will be able to hopefully help develop here in his sophomore season. Terquavion Smith, after entering his name in the NBA draft this offseason, was a lot of buzz around this guy on Twitter, throughout the NBA scout circle. I mean, did a really outstanding job at the NBA combines and some of the workouts that they did. I think, he was one of the top 5 guys, if not the leader, if my memory's, fading a little bit here in the 3-point shooting contest. We know Terquavion Smith can shoot the ball. We know he's an elite scorer. Obviously, there is some development to be had with Smith, but kind of surprisingly, at least from my perspective, I mean, you guys might have a different view of this, being boots on the ground there in Raleigh, but it seemed like with all the buzz that was going around Terquavion Smith, I know he was ranked the number 22 prospect in the NBA draft according to ESPN. Looked like he was a potential first-round guy in this draft. Kind of surprising that he's coming back to NC State for a second college season, considering, if he had first-round potential, that's that's a bold choice to make, that he wanted to come back to college. I saw that, in his statement that he was coming back, he wanted to get another year of the college experience. Part of that being his first season was, at least partially impacted by COVID and just getting back to a more normal college environment. Maybe he wants to have a normal college year as a college student and see if he can rise his stock even more to become a lottery pick in the upcoming draft next year. But Matt, we'll start with you. Were you surprised that Terquavion Smith decided to come back to NC State, and just how important is it for the Wolfpack program in terms of having a bounce back year and getting a guy like Smith to return?
In terms of being surprised, yeah, because I cover NC State for a living, and pleasant developments don't tend to happen very often over the 18 years or so I've been doing this. We reported all along that there was a lot more optimism about Terquavion Smith than Darian Sebron, who did stay in the NBA draft. Different circumstances, as we noted plenty of times. Darian was technically at the age of a college senior. People forget he went to prep school after graduating, and then redshirted a year at NC State. So by the time he hit the court as a freshman, he had already was a couple years removed from his high school graduating class. So, from an age standpoint, for personal reason, he was ready to move on. With Terquavion, I felt like he was in a win-win situation. And we had always reported that they kind of viewed it as a 50-50. A lot was going to depend on where he got drafted. But the beauty of NIL, and there are some very good plushes for NIL, one of them being is that we might finally get to see these guys stick around college a little bit longer on the basketball side of things. There's a long stretch where it used to be you had to be a lottery pick when I was a kid. The lottery was kind of the cutoff before you would go pro. And then it became first round pick. And then it became, if I get drafted. Then it became, can I just get a contract, right? And so the bar kept getting lower. Hopefully we're starting to raise that bar back up to where, look, it makes sense for me to go back to college, cash in on my name, image, and likeness. I'll make more money doing that than being in the G League, which is no fun probably anyway. And I can improve my stock. When Terquavion went to the NBA Combine and got such high praise, and you see Draft Express from ESPN really just kind of following him around, and you see mock draft putting him in late first round, I kind of assumed that was going to be enough for Terquavion. Now, there were people who said that he wanted top 20. He said he wanted top 20. Maybe I should have taken him at his word a little bit stronger. But obviously he meant it. And so he's back, and it's huge for NC State. When you go, forget, they added Jarkel Jr., who's the leading scorer at Ole Miss at guard. They added DJ Burns, who was the Conference Player of the Year in the Post. So they've added two very important pieces to surround Terquavion Smith. They get Casey Morsell back. They, you're getting some guys healthy back. And so I think it's safe to say Kevin Keith won the offseason when he needed to win an offseason. He won an offseason. Was it a complete and total smashing success offseason? That might be a little bit too far. That would have been included Darian Sebron coming back and Manny Bates not transferring. But he still won the offseason. And Terquavion Smith coming back probably. I mean, you're talking about a first-team All-ACC guy. You're talking about a guy who, if he continues to progress, could be a lottery pick. How often has that happened? We hadn't had that in NC State since T.J. Warren, realistically. I mean, Dennis Smith was a lottery pick, but I'm not sure he was a first-team All-ACC guy. And T.J. Warren didn't have a whole lot around him. I think he had Ralston Turner and not much else, if I recall. This Terquavion has a little bit more around him. It could potentially. So, knock on wood, you're healthy. That's going to be everything. But you like the roster as it's set up. It's intriguing, I would say.
Ethan, just from a big picture perspective, seeing a guy like Smith that had all the draft buzz return to NC State, I mean, do you agree with Matt in the sense that this is kind of a byproduct of, NIL playing its way into college athletics? At least to me, it doesn't seem like, NIL out the window. Terquavion Smith doesn't have an opportunity to legally make money if he returned to a second year of college basketball. With a first-round potential, he's probably gone. But do you think we'll see more of this as, NIL continues to advance in the college game and some of these college athletes are able to make some money by not necessarily jumping to the draft as soon as they have any type of draft stock?
And that's a great question, and I really hope so because, that was obviously a factor here. Because if you're a first-round pick and there was rumors he had a promise, you're probably going. But he didn't because of rumored NIL packages, and hopefully that continues. And, I see no way it won't, because now when you have those guys who are right on the border of first and second round, or right on the border of second round or undrafted, maybe a deal from an NIL collective keeps them going back or makes them more willing to be excited about having one more year of the college experience, like Terquavion said, which I sympathize with after just finishing up my third year of college, which 2.5 of which have been during the pandemic. But obviously him coming back is massive for the program. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say it could be a huge turning point for the basketball team. I mean, all the energy around the team was pretty much negative for the past 6 to 9 months. So him coming back is huge. He's going to be the guy. We're going to see what he looks like when he just gets handed the reins of a program with a pretty solid group of guys around him. And like Matt said, I'm looking forward to see what it looks like on the court.
Yeah, and just to add to that, what makes it even more surprising is that it's coming from a guard. Guards typically have a lot higher draft stock in the NBA than big men, and I think as we continue this NIL trend, I mean, you saw it with Armando Bacot, a ACC Player of the Year candidate last year, probably would have gone, I don't know, at best case scenario, late first round, if not, probably would have been a second round flyer type of pick. Obviously, a very talented college basketball player, but the future in the NBA is not around the traditional big man. If you're not one of the best 5 shot blockers in the world and you're above 7 foot, if you're a big man, you're going to have to learn how to shoot. You're going to have to be an elite defender. And the game is just becoming smaller and smaller too. I mean, just look at the 2 teams in the NBA Finals right now. Golden State Warriors, they play small ball. They got the death lineup, and you got the Boston Celtics, who do have some of that size and elite shot blocking, but when they match up against the Golden State Warriors, they like to go small ball. So, I think a Luka Garza maybe a couple years ago at Iowa. He did go to the NBA draft, but guys like that, or Drew Timme going back to Gonzaga, a great example in terms of Drew Timme, probably not a future NBA star. Could he make a roster? Could he be a role player in the future? Maybe, but the value of being the big man on campus, a superstar at a place like Gonzaga or UNC or even NC State, there's value to that, and particularly advertising value in terms of NIL contracts. So it's going to be interesting to see in terms of what type of compensation Terquavion Smith would be able to get next year and how that would compare to a rookie contract. But all things to monitor as we move forward into the 21st century of college athletics and the age of NIL. And last topic on men's basketball, Matt, just wanted to kind of get your thoughts in terms of I've got a mock starting lineup here based on the return of Terquavion Smith. I do see a noticeable hole in this roster. There's one scholarship spot left. I'm sure Kevin Keatts will go try to fill that somewhere in the transfer portal, although it's pretty slim pickings now as we stand here in early June. So you're going to have to just kind of deal with whatever you can get out of the transfer portal. But I got Terquavion Smith, obviously going to be a starter. Jarkel Joyner, starting guard. Casey Morsell as a three guard rotation in the starting lineup. Then I got the newcomer DJ Burns as a big man. And my biggest question mark is who's going to fill that fifth starting spot. I've got Ernest Ross as a potential guy that could play that 4 position. He's got the athleticism to run in transition, probably offsets a little bit in terms of Burns being a bigger guy. You're not going to be able to run as transitionary, fast break, high tempo as Kevin Keats likes to run, but he's going to be more of a traditional big man. But, do you kind of see the starting lineup shaping up like that? And the gap that I see is where's your 6'6", 6'7" wing that, can play from the perimeter, but can also go get you, 5 to 8 rebounds a game?
Good question. I think they were counting on that being Luis Rodriguez, who was with Levi Watkins at Ole Miss, but the allure of playing closer to his home on the West Coast at UNLV won out in the end. They were kind of back and forth between UNLV and NC State. It's funny, I have on my yellow pad, Joe Giglio style, I got my starting 5. And only difference is, Jesse.
Boom.
I had Jack Clark at power forward, the newcomer from LaSalle. And I tell you why I did, because I think Kevin Keats wants to be old. And I have a good reason for thinking that, but not old himself. I'm talking about his basketball team. He wants his basketball team to be old. I'm sure he wants to be young forever. But Jarkel Jr. would be a 6th-year, super senior type, 5th or 6th year, I can't remember, but he'd be a super senior. Casey Morsell, senior. DJ Burns, super senior. Jack Clark, redshirt senior. Some of these guys have a couple years of eligibility left, but by doing that, you're surrounding a lottery pick, Terquavion Smith, with a bunch of old dudes, relatively speaking, in college basketball. And so you have an old, experienced, accomplished group to varying degrees, with varying degrees of successes and varying degrees of experiences of what level of basketball around a potential lottery first-team All-ACC guy. I think that intrigued Kevin Keats. Add to it that Clark kind of brings some perimeter skills, which is where the game's going. I think most guys want 4 guys facing the basket now. I don't know if Ernest Ross quite has that capability yet.
He's raw.
Yeah. So, and the beauty of it is this team should have some depth. They do have 1 scholarship left. They did host Cedric Henderson on an official visit. He was the name we first brought up a couple of weeks ago from Campbell. And then it got reported a few days later that he was going to visit NC State. I know he went to Texas Tech this weekend. I know he is at Arizona, I believe, as we speak, or maybe just wrapped up a visit to Arizona. He's an older guy who put his name into the draft. Have to wonder if Terquavion Smith coming back makes him wonder how much opportunity he's going to have to score the basketball. Remember, Jarkel Jr. is a scorer too. And so I dropped a name in the chat today that I heard. You want to sign up? $1. Sign up. Go read it in the chat. Maybe I think it's a new name for most people. But fits that mold of a 6'6" wing. I don't know how serious it is at this point, but I'll also add this. You don't just because you have a scholarship doesn't mean you have to use it. They have 1 scholarship left. Look, 12 guys aren't going to play. I mean, you're talking about 8 or 9 guys are going to play. So just because you have it doesn't mean you have to use it. And so we'll see how it plays out.
Well,
and it'll be interesting to see how that board changes once Justis comes in, because he is so connected in North Carolina and the country recruiting as a whole. So maybe we see a few new names pop up over the next few weeks. We'll just have to see.
And all the more reason to take advantage of that deal. $1, year's worth of premium subscription. Look at that veteran plug from Mac Carter. The rookie came in. Ethan McDowell came in hot with a great plug in his introduction. He's introducing himself. Hey, kids. Hey, sign up for my website. That was impressive, and the veteran had to come in strong, too, to match that rookie enthusiasm. Matt, you brought up as good of a point as I could come up with. The only reason I didn't put Jack Clark in my mock starting 5 is I had no idea what we're going to get out of this guy. His numbers from LaSalle don't really jump off the board to me, whereas a Jarkel Joyner and a DJ Burns, their numbers looked a lot more impressive from places that I'm much more familiar with. So, a lot's going to be decided here in the next few months leading up to the basketball season. And, of course, NC State will have their non-conference slate to hopefully figure out some of these rotational questions. But I do like your points in terms of just surrounding Terquavion Smith with a lot of seniority. That strategy sounds pretty sound to me. We'll see where it goes. All right, let's throw it back to Ethan here, because we're gonna transition out of basketball into football. And as we've already talked about, Ethan has been working like a dog out there at these football Dave Doeren summer camps, talking to prospects, talking to what the future of NC State football holds. So, Ethan, just tell us about I don't think this is your first rodeo in terms of going to these types of events, but probably your first at NC State. So just your impressions of the last week and the biggest things that jumped out to you in terms of the prospects that you liked and the direction of the future of the program based on what you were able to see.
Definitely. Well, it was a really fun 3 days. I mean, I was really surprised by just the sheer amount of talent that are there. Between people visiting and the people actually participating, there were a lot of star power on the campus. The first guy I'm going to talk about is someone Wolfpack fans are very familiar with, Lex Thomas. He's been committed for about a year, and he was at all 3 days of the camp. He threw at 2 of them, Friday and Sunday. On Friday, he was there with Nathan Leacock and Kevin Concepcion, 2 major NC State targets, and 2 guys that NC State has a decent shot at. And Lex Thomas has been working on him pretty hard, trying to get him on campus for a visit. I know Matt reported Concepcion's going to be up in a couple weeks, so that's exciting. But in passing drills and on one-on-ones, they showed off a very real connection. I believe Thomas and Leacock are on the same 7-on-7 team, so they've got a lot of reps together. But him and Concepcion kind of showed an instant connection. They had a couple deep passes that were really nice. And if I was an NC State fan, I'd get really excited about the possibility of having that trio join the class at some point. And other than that, on Sunday he came back and threw to a couple other major targets, including Tamarcus Cooley, who he's a Roseville guy. He just transferred there. And I'd say he was probably the most impressive player at the camp. He played both sides of the ball and excelled at both. He made Lex Thomas's life difficult for a little bit for the first half of camp, and then he made it a lot easier during the second half. They connected for a couple deep touchdowns, and what I really liked was how much he was jumping up to the front of the line. He wanted as many reps as possible. He wanted to show off that skill set. And after the camp, I was talking to him. He was here like 12 hours after getting back from an official visit at Ole Miss. So he got back from a visit that he said was really great, by the way. He really loved Oxford. But he was back in Raleigh, made the quick trip from Roseville, and balled out. And he had a great performance, and it was incredibly impressive. And another guy that I wanted to mention that I bet we'll talk about a little more later is Brandon Sisk, the guy we missed at the top of the show. He really showed off and was one of the best defensive backs we saw all weekend, to the point where the staff offered him a scholarship directly after camp, and he returned the campus yesterday and went on an unofficial visit. And we have some interesting scoops to do with him on the website. $1 for an entire year. Just going to say that one more time. But Brandon was excellent. He was a super nice kid, very confident in his abilities, and he backed it up. He ran a 4.45, I believe, 40-yard dash, showing off incredible speed, and that really just instantly caught the eye of NC State coaches, and then he translated that instantly to the field. And so he really stood out, and that's really just scratching the surface. There were a ton of just really awesome players there. Kylan Fox is a huge 2024 tight end target. He has 39 offers already. We talked to him last week for an article up on the site, but he was doing tight end drills, and he was also on an unofficial visit. So it's big for NC State to get those guys on campus. And I guess a broader takeaway from the weekend would be, even though there's only 3 commits right now in the 2023 class, I think NC State fans should be really excited about how this class can end up, especially looking at all of the offensive recruits and guys that are going to be on campus in the next couple of weeks. I'd get really excited. And especially 2024, there's some guys we look good with there. And yeah, it's just a really good weekend. A lot of really good players and a lot of guys that NC State is going to have a legitimate chance with.
Well, it sounds like you were able to take away a lot from those camps, Ethan, and well said. I mean, a lot of information there in just a short period of time, but Ethan, you can't say it enough because, again, we don't bombard our listeners with ads. This is a free of charge podcast, so the least they can do is put up with the plugs. But all that information, if you want that expanded, you want all of it written down, you want to recap what Ethan was able to say there, go to the Wolfpacker.com. He's been firing off the articles, just really great information. So take advantage of that deal. And Matt, I don't know how much you were out at the football camps. I'm sure you were there at least a few days, if not as much as Ethan. But, I mean, Ethan sounds like he's got a really firm grasp on what happened there. I want to go a little bit more big picture with you. This is a really crucial window for NC State to take advantage of, not only what they've done the past 2 seasons on the field. They've put together, 2 successful campaigns in 2020 and 2021, but all the offseason buzz going into this year and what they may or may not be able to do on the field in 2022, just seeing NC State's name up there in the preseason rankings with the preseason buzz. You're hearing some of these national media types, saying, is NC State a legitimate sleeper for the college football playoff? All that stuff can only help with recruiting. And as we saw back in 2017, when NC State was able to put together another really strong season with, that roster stacked with now current Pac pros, that was a really important recruiting class for NC State. And now you're seeing the fruits of that recruiting class take place on the field now as NC State climbs the ranks up the national ladder. But Matt, isn't it super crucial right now? I mean, now's the time to hit when NC State is in the national media, all the buzz surrounding it. This is kind of the future of the direction of the program, right? In terms of going into the end of this decade.
Yeah, I think you hit on some a great point, Justin. I just want to kind of point out why this is a nice window for NC State and some challenges that maybe they didn't have this time as you would have normally expect. But, you always recruit off of, people say, if they have a good season this fall, recruiting will really be great come signing day. And it doesn't work that way. You always recruit off what you did the previous year. So what I mean by that is what you did in 2021 pays off dividends in the 2023 class. The 2022 class that's signing right after that 2021 season, long ago made up their minds, long ago came up with the perceptions they had, right or wrong, of your program. It's hard to get in good with a player just because you had a good year and somebody else didn't. But what it does is it sets you up for the next class. And so NC State has been set up well for this class. I have to remember, they were so handcuffed by scholarship numbers last year. I forget how many they signed, but I think it was like 12 players.
This year it was 12.
Yeah, this year they can be more aggressive. And so they don't have to be as selective on the scholarship. They can be more aggressive. And I'll be frank, let's be honest. The folks in Chapel Hill who had a hot train in the in-state recruiting the last couple of years, that momentum has flowed. What happens when you don't, and this isn't trash talk. I'm not trying to do rivalry talk. I'm just trying to be realistic. You had unbelievable expectations over in Chapel Hill. They had a losing record last year. And all of a sudden, it's harder to recruit off of that momentum or lack of. And so that door for a lot of these in-state recruits kind of reopened, where it was like, man, that Mac Brown stuff looks a little bit like it was overhyped. And how they're going to be without Sam Howell at quarterback. Meanwhile, NC State, maybe they don't have the hype, but if they were the ones that finished the year ranked, they're the ones that could have had a 10-win season if things hadn't gone haywire in San Diego with the Holiday Bowl. So, that opens up doors. It was before, let's be honest, that some of these in-state kids were getting caught up in the Mac is back hoopla. And they had a really nice first year, for a couple years with Mac Brown, to build off of that too, to be fair. And so you've got scholarships available. You're recruiting off a couple good years. Your main rival for in-state recruits is lost some momentum. There's a lot of opportunities and doors open for you. And by the way, you're about to lose a boatload of guys, probably to the NFL. If not this year, combined with next year, a lot of them could be after this year. So if you recruit like Damon Fagan, on 3 consensus 4-star. What do you mean by on 3 consensus? It's the only ranking that combines all 4 of the rankings equally into one ranking. Combining them all, he's a 4-star, and he's a top 300 guy, right, Justin? I mean, Ethan.
I believe so. I think somewhere in the 200s.
I haven't seen him walking around camp. I can see why. That's what his high school safety is supposed to be. And it's a young man who Ohio State we believe to be the favorite. I know Florida State, Miami, LSU. I mean, this big-time programs after this. But he's looking at NC State, and he's thinking they're losing all their safeties after this year. It's a big-time program that has immediate playing time. So add that to the mix. So now you got 4 things really kind of going for you on the recruiting trail. Now that factor is, we talked about a lot of pluses of NIL. The reality is that NIL's also introduced pay for play. Call it for what it is. And you hear what Ryan Day at Ohio State talks about, what he's going to need to put a successful class. You know what Texas A&M did. Sorry, Jimbo Fisher. We all know what you did. You know what Nick Saban thinks about what Jimbo Fisher did. And so, that may complicate things. NC State is not going to be as well positioned in the NIL as big-time program. So whereas before you may be able to really hang in there, particularly with big-name in-state guys, that adds a layer of challenge. I'm not saying NC State can't overcome it by any stretch. It may be, the scale for NC State may be enough, but it does add a layer of a challenge that was not there before, where you're going to the Dalen Smothers at Charlotte. Just took an official visit to Oklahoma. I know Florida State is on him pretty good. He's going to take an official visit to NC State. But don't think that Oklahoma and Florida State aren't talking about NIL opportunities with him. Noah Rogers is taking an official visit to Ohio State, I believe on June 17th. Don't think that they haven't talked about NIL opportunities at Ohio State, where in the past that may not have been as a concern that you're recruiting against if you're in NC State. So that's the one challenge. I'm not saying it's bad or good. I'm just saying it's a challenge in the reality of the NIL. But a lot of other pieces come together real well. There is the transfer portal, by the way. So don't be surprised if NC State holds off some scholarships, because it's kind of to bridge the gap between the next wave and the current wave, to prevent the drop-off that they had like in 2019 when it all went so bad, mainly because of injuries, but also because they were really young. So now you might be appealing to a half dozen transfers to kind of fill in those gaps so you don't fall off as much too.
Well, it sounds like a complete 180 in terms of just the environment of the up and coming in-state recruiting classes. I can remember back in 2020 in the pandemic year, my first year at the Wolfpacker, I'm out there at Cardinal Gibbons covering, the upcoming class with Matt Carter. It was one of my first assignments, talking to all these recruits.
You talked to all of them that day too.
Talked to all of them. Yeah,
that was hilarious.
They were lining up. I was even talking to the ones that We're not going to get any offers, unfortunately. Yeah, it was a form of rookie hazing, I suppose.
Yeah.
But you could just see it. I'd bring up NC State, and some of these bigger name guys would be like, NC State? Nah, man, I'm trying to go to Carolina. Like, that UNC was the top dog at the time, and it sounds like that's flipped based on what we've seen on the field over the past couple years. And as a proud NC State alum, that's music to my ears, and it makes what happens on the field this fall even more important because, look, if NC State doesn't meet these high expectations this fall, it could easily flip right back. But if it does, then it could be, a solidifying of what the culture currently is in state. And last point on the NIL thing, and we'll probably talk about this a little bit more with our baseball talk here as we wrap up this podcast. I don't have as pessimistic. It's certainly something to monitor, especially when you're competing with the Ohio States and the Oklahomas and the Florida States of the world. But I will say it's not like this brand new thing. Money has always been a part of the equation. The only difference is the head coach can wrap their arm around you and talk about NIL during the official visit, as opposed to 10 years ago when the donor pulls up in their Ferrari and says, "Hey, come over here. Let me tell you about the bag of money you might get if you end up coming to Oklahoma or Ohio State." That the difference being it's all out in the open now. So now it's fair game, and we'll see how NC State's able to compete in that world. But that's going to give me my transition to baseball, where we're going to talk about Tommy Tanks White entering the transfer portal. I don't want to dwell too much on NC State being snubbed of the NCAA tournament. That's kind of old news at this point. Old news for NC State fans. Look, it's just another chapter in the book that's going to be published one day called NC State, A History of NC State, you-know-what stuff. Fill in the blank. Tommy White, unfortunately, entering the transfer portal. Obviously a fan favorite this past year after breaking the NCAA record for home runs by a freshman in college baseball. And the initial knee-jerk reaction is, oh my God, this is NIL. See, this is everything wrong with college sports. He's just going to get a bag of money somewhere else, and isn't that a shame? Well, you know what? As we peel back the layers a little bit and everybody takes a deep breath, it seems like we're coming to more of an understanding as, maybe it wasn't money motivated. Maybe he wants to play closer to home. Maybe there's baseball-related things involved where maybe he wants to play out in the field a little bit more, and he was more of a designated hitter at NC State, and, just looking at the future of the roster, where he kind of plays into that, it's not the end of the world that a player decides to play somewhere else. In my opinion, the transfer portal giveth, and the transfer portal taketh. It's not all bad, it's not all good, it's somewhere in the middle. Matt, I want to go to you first, and Ethan, I want to go to you second. I want to get both of your takes on A, Tommy White leaving, and B, just the impacts of the transfer portal, just your thoughts on the modern climate of the transfer portal these college athletes are just much more likely to transfer than they were 5-10 years ago due to rule changes. Is it good? Is it bad? Is it somewhere in between for the college game? I'll start with you, Matt.
Well, I know we're not going to talk about the snub too much, but I will say real quickly, I think this is probably the most legitimate gripe NC State has had about some stuff. The women's basketball being the 1 seed, having to play Connecticut, the 2 seed. But we all knew that somebody was going to get screwed in that deal. That was more incredibly unlucky NC State being in that position where they were, right? They were the natural team to go to Connecticut based on how it played out. And they just got the unfair draw. What happened in Omaha, I'm not going to rehash. NC State deserved some of that blame. The NCAA didn't handle it very well either. I think if you took NC State's name off and put Mississippi State's name on it, it would have been the same outcome and the same level of disappointment on Mississippi State's side. Whomever that happened to was going to be incredibly disappointed and probably upset with how things went down and how the NCAA doesn't handle everything very well. And so I'm sure there's some other gripes in there in the last year. I can't remember. The bowl game was all UCLA, by the way. That wasn't NCAA. But this one they have some gripes about. And you peel back the onions a little bit, and you do wonder if there wasn't some non-baseball reasons involved for leaving NC State out of the field. But Ethan got introduced to NC State stuff on day one of the job because we were in the office together Memorial Day. I was annoying the heck out of him, I'm sure, by having the volume up on the selection show. He's trying to get work done over there. And I remember thinking, oh, well, they're going to get put into Oregon State region. That's the last one, so they're going to Oregon State. Kind of weird to be traveling to Oregon State. And then Vanderbilt popped up at the last at-large. And I looked up the bracket online. I was like, did I miss it? And then quickly ESPN started talking about NC State being the team out. And I said, they didn't make it. And I remember Ethan going, what? So crazy. As for Tommy White, yes. I think you've hit it on the nail. I think we've been hearing for a while that he wanted to be in the field. He was disappointed about being a designated hitter. I can tell you, we reported it in the premium that he turned down NIL opportunities at NC State. He wasn't motivated financially to cash in on Tommy Tanks. He could have been drafted. I mean, if he didn't set a very high demand for a signing bonus coming out of high school, he would have been drafted fairly high and gotten a decent amount of money. I think he made a very early decision to come to NC State, thinking that he probably was going to be using NC State as leverage to go for the draft. The money he wanted in the draft wasn't there, so he decided to follow through on NC State. In hindsight, probably could have taken a little more time to decide which college he was going to go to. Realized that he would have preferred to stay closer to home and in the St. Pete, Tampa kind of area of Florida. It's no secret where everybody thinks he's going to end up. That's Florida State. It's certainly much closer to his home. So, as for the transfer portal, look, you have to balance it. I think David Hale explains it the best. You have to give these student athletes their rights. But you also have to remember there are fans that are the lifeblood for all of sports. And if you make it unfun for the fans, you just have to be careful about that. Fans don't care about coaches coming and going. They care about the product on the team coming and going. And if they start to lose the relatability of the sport and the ability to relate to the athletes that they're supposed to be pulling for over 3 to 4 years, it can have a detrimental effect. So how do you balance that between the right of the athlete to do what every other student can do, which is transfer if they want to? Yeah, I couldn't have transferred. Justin, I don't know about you. Obviously, Ethan's smart enough to be able to transfer to wherever he wanted to go because he graduated in like 3.5 years. But I kind of, where I think of it, maybe we need to set like a minimum GPA and say, if you're going to be like a normal student, I couldn't have transferred to Harvard. My grades aren't good enough to go to Harvard, right? So let's make some kind of minimum threshold, not like a crazy one. These athletes have unbelievable demands on their time, but that makes it more normal. If you do your work and you meet the minimum standards, you are rewarded with an opportunity to transfer to whatever school you want without punishment, or punishment or sit-out year, whatever you want to call it. If you don't do your work, then no, you can't do it. You would have to sit out a year because no other student could just walk up with a 1.1 GPA and transfer, if you know what I mean. So that's kind of my feeling of a compromise for it all. I don't know if that helps or hurts. But look, it's not fun to be a Pittsburgh fan when you got the best receiver in the country and he says he's not going to go to the NFL draft, and you think you got the great receiver, and then on the day before the transfer portal closes, he hops in, and we all know it was an NIL-motivated play, and he ends up going exactly where everybody said the NIL money was coming from, in Southern Cal. Well, life as a Pittsburgh fan doesn't get as fun anymore when you're worried about, oh, great, we got a great player. He's going to leave at the end of the year. He's going to go in the portal, and he's going to leave, and going to leave us hanging. So that's where I struggle. You know, how can you make the fan experience still great and be right by the players? The coach's job is hard. I get that. I sympathize with them a little bit for that. It's no fair for Jim Larranaga to do everything right with Isaiah Wan and they get held hostage because the booster paid somebody else some money to come join them, and then he wants that same money. I mean, Larranaga did nothing wrong there, right? But Justin brought up a good point to me once. We've debated this. Larranaga gets paid a crap load of money to figure it out. So I feel less sorry for them. I sympathize with them, but I feel less sorry for them. I mainly worry about the fan experience of let's try not to be too detrimental to the fan experience because they are truthful. Look, without fans, you don't have the sport. It's the bottom line. So.
Ethan, I think Matt did a great job of touching on the NC State baseball specific items and Tommy Tanks. I've got thoughts on what he said, but I want to go to you. Just your impression, and you're a younger guy. I think there's also a generational divide here in terms of this conversation. Older generations are used to what the college model used to be. We're coming up at a time where this is a transitory, renaissance in college sports. Just your thoughts on the impacts of the transfer portal being, this new shiny toy. Do you think it's a trend, or do you think it's something that we're going to see more of in years to come? And is it a good or bad thing?
I don't know if you can really paint it as a objectively good or bad thing. One thing I did want to touch on with Tommy White, which after thinking about it for about a week is where I landed on it, is where Tommy White is at in his career is completely different than a year ago in terms of his celebrity, in terms of the platform he has, and just the caliber of baseball player he knows he is. So coming to NC State and then having that experience and then pretty much everything changing in his life probably, I can understand why maybe you want to go back home and be closer to home and prepare yourself for the MLB. But as the transfer portal as a whole, I think we will see it slow down a little bit, just because one thing that you will see right now is a lot of guys go in there and they're either moving down multiple levels or they're not finding a place at all. So I think once it becomes clear that the grass isn't always greener when you enter the portal, I think we'll see it calm down a little bit. But as far as the best players transferring to the best schools, that's going to continue. Like Matt said, it's all about balancing that with the fan experience. But I don't think you can really tie a player to a school. I think they should be able to go wherever they want. It's just like if you commit to ECU as a freshman in high school and then NC State offers your junior year. Not a huge indictment on ECU, but you're probably going to NC State if you get that offer. And that's totally fine. And I don't think it should change drastically from going to college. And I'd argue that it does make the fan experience in some ways better, because now there is year-round intrigue. It probably shows up in our website traffic. When Tommy Tanks transferred, fans weren't happy about it, but they wanted to talk about it, and it keeps that conversation around college sports going year-round. And I think it could be surprising how much of a good thing it is for college sports in the long run, because then you do have situations with Terquavion where he also could have come back and he probably could have transferred just about anywhere in the country, but he chose not to. He's back at NC State with the NIL deal. So packaging NIL, the transfer portal, I think in the long run it's going to be a good thing. It's definitely a good thing right now for the athletes, and I don't really have that much sympathy for the coaches. I have faith that they'll be able to figure it out, and these schools have enough money where they can figure it out. And I think it's all about just giving the athletes the opportunity to be in the best place for them to be successful. I mean, if I go to school up in Boston, if I had gone to Boston and realized I hate the cold, and but I had to sit out a year, and I couldn't join the Wolfpacker for another year if I wanted to transfer to a different school to get my degree. That would have been tough, and that's an unfair situation for anyone to be in. So I'm glad players are able to move where they think is going to be the best fit for them. And I think as we get further along into this process, there will be a better understanding of how it works, and it'll make much more sense to fans, coaches, athletes, just across the board.
Yeah, really well said. Both of you brought up really great points, and I'm with both of you in the sense that there's got to be this balance between fairness to the athletes and the fan experience. And right now in the NIL model, where the only compensation that athletes are entitled to is what they're able to get on the free market based on their name, image, and likeness, that when you have an open transfer system, basically every athlete in college right now is a free agent going on a year-to-year basis. And really, I think the question fans should ask themselves, if they're really angry about the state of college athletics right now and they don't like the transition of their favorite players going somewhere else, or they don't like other players coming in, they don't like learning these new rosters year in, year out, this is what it's going to be. If this is okay with you, great. If it's something that you don't like, well, how do professional sports organizations keep players in one spot for periods of time longer than a season? They sign contracts. They sign multi-year contracts. So if you want to suggest something that is going to ethically keep players in one spot throughout the entirety of their college career, well, you're probably going to have to start paying them like employees. And that's another conversation for a different day, but that might be where we're heading. If we get tired of the transfer portal, every half the athletes in college sports going somewhere else after a year, they have every right to do that right now because they're not getting paid by the schools. Their labor is free. They're college students. They should be able to transfer here, there, wherever, and fans just have to put up with it because, I got no time for the man babies on Twitter. If you want to badmouth a kid about transferring, then, take a look in the mirror. Okay? That's all I got to say about that. But if you want a commitment, you want to keep somebody in a spot for many years, well, you might have to start signing contracts, school to player. But we're going to end it on that. I think we've talked long enough about a bunch of different things. It's been a really good conversation. Ethan, great job on your first podcast with the Wolfpacker. I'm sure the Wolfpacker Nation will be loving this, and more to come from Ethan. If you want to give him a follow, by the way, again, it's at Ethan McDowell on Twitter. Follow us while you're at it, the main account at the Wolfpacker. And if you want to give me a follow, it's at Justin H. Will on Twitter. Give us a like on Facebook, NC State Wolfpack on thewolfpacker.com. One last. Go ahead, Matt.
Okay. So if you want to leave a comment, help my man Ethan find a place to get a haircut. So if you have any good haircut suggestions in the Raleigh-Durham area, I'm not saying he needs one, but I'm just saying, throwing it out there. You're gonna need one.
I do need barbershop recommendations. Yes, please.
Okay.
Wow. Okay. Ethan, I'll give you one after the podcast because we're not giving out any free advertisements here. If they want to pay me to give you a suggestion, they're gonna have to pay the pod. But Matt Carter, false start on your part. I was about to get to the YouTube subscription, but we'll go there first. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, the Wolfpacker YouTube channel. Give this video a thumbs up, and like Matt said, drop a comment. You want to have a comment idea, suggest where Ethan can go get a haircut in the Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill area. I think you're living in Raleigh, right, Ethan?
Yep, downtown Raleigh.
Okay, right on. Okay, so maybe somewhere closer to downtown Raleigh. And lastly, we've said it a million times on this podcast, but one last time to wrap it up, head over to thewolfpacker.com. Take advantage of that deal. A lot of things we covered. You want to know it before we talk about it on the podcast. Take advantage of the deal. Just $1 for a year's worth of premium subscription on thewolfpacker.com, part of the On3 network. And so for Ethan McDowell, Matt Carter, I'm Justin Williams, and this has been the Wolfpacker Podcast.